Hello and welcome, bookworms. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative. We're looking at Forever and a Death by Donald Westlake. Now, this was the James Bond book that never was. And essentially, Donald Westlake was commissioned to sort of like write a James Bond story, and then it never ended up happening. And then this was published sort of like after his death, and he decided to turn it into they decided to turn it into a novel, and it was published obviously when he passed away. And honestly, it was such a good book. So obviously the whole Bond thing is like, obviously Bond is a secret agent, and he goes off and he uncovers the bad guy plot. He gets a couple of women along the way, he gambles, he smokes. He's essentially an alpha bro kind of thing. But he also has like a little soft spot sometimes. And he'll then eventually win and defeat the bad guy. And this was sort of like that. But at the same time, I was just a bit like, I actually think I enjoyed this a lot more. So you've got Curtis, who's your main guy, who basically what happened was he was a dodgy construction guy in Hong Kong. Then Hong Kong was bought back by the Chinese, and any sort of like British people were like kicked out. And then he feels betrayed. And so he's then got this plan, and he gets this engineer called Manville. Good God. And Manville works on this solution that what you can do is set sort of like certain charges in the water and create a mini tsunami, and the water will break down the buildings into like the landfill. The landfill will then fill up, and then it'll kind of become a solid ground that you can then build foundations on. So obviously we can see where this is going. So obviously George Manville has no idea that he's being used to elicit the downfall of Hong Kong. And Curtis is like, yes, it works, let's go. But then Kim, who is sort of like our hot female character, when the test is going on, so again, Manville thinks it's like to build a resort. Curtis is looking to see if it works. And then Kim's like, oh, I'm going to jump in the water because you think you're going to destroy the coral reef. They weren't destroying the coral reef. And she jumps in and gets taken out by this percussion wave. And then Curtis is like, oh, okay, she's alive, but she might die of her injuries. And then he goes from like passive murder to murder and tries to take her out. George Manville realizes that there's something going on and tries to protect Kim. And then it's just like this whole, how Bond films and Bond books go, or it gets really complicated. And then they sort of like end up going sort of like to Singapore and everything, and realizing that actually, Curtis isn't who he says he is, and everything's sort of like going wrong. And it was, do you know what? I could not put it down. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I read it just sort of like over the first weekend in May, or the second weekend in May, while I was down in Brighton, and I was just like, oh yeah, let's go. Another book. And honestly, so enjoyable. The characters were really good. The bad guy, sort of like, the only downside, right, and it would have got a 5 for me if it wasn't for the ending. The ending felt like a cop-out. And it felt like, and again, I don't spoil endings, and I let you people like read it and get to the end of the books yourselves. But let me know in the comments if you think it was as much of a cop-out for you guys as it was for me, because I got to the ending and I was like, really? That's how they're gonna deal with that. That's what we're gonna get. And that really pissed me off. But apart from that, the rest of the story is really good. The espionage bits were really good. I love the George Manville character, which I think was supposed to be the Bond character. And honestly, like the plots were great, and I was just kind of sat there going, oh, this is interesting. So I would say give this book a go. Even if you're not a Bond fan, you might very much enjoy this, because George Manville's character isn't as much like Bond as you think he would have been. He doesn't really drink or smoke, and he only really sleeps with the one woman. So, do you know what I mean? But hardback, paperback, library, you know the drill, Kindle, however you want to consume media, audiobooks, however you want to consume it, give it a go and let me know below in the comments what you think. But thank you so much for your continued support. And remember to always keep it contento.